Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us again for another episode of Hudson County Review Live. I am your host, the man whose voice soothes like Sean Combs and the skills to still choke guys like John Jones, John Arhitis. Today we're joined with the Kearny Mayor Alberto Santos. Mayor, thanks for coming on.
How are you, John? That's an interesting introduction.
I got a couple of them, you may have heard. But today, obviously there is a lot of Kearny issues I do want to discuss with you. We've tried to get out to West Hudson a little more lately, but certainly I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the ICE contract vote by the Board of Chosen Freeholders. For those of you that may not know, Al is the clerk for the freeholders. So just first of all, the thing that caught my attention, of course, was the fact that there was no photography or filming allowed in the courtroom due to a ruling, an order by assignment judge Peter Barisuk. So could you tell us a little bit about that and what your guys' expectation and interaction was on that?
We scheduled a public meeting for the jury assembly room, which is on the fourth floor of the administration building annex. We only learned mid-afternoon yesterday, and the meeting was scheduled for 6 p.m., that the court has a policy that for security reasons there's no videoing or photography or recording in the building for obvious reasons, because those are sensitive buildings and could be targets. We didn't realize that until very late. We could not move the meeting at that point, and it was important to take action on the matters. So that was a wrinkle, and more than a wrinkle. It was a problem that we did not expect until it was too late to address.
So obviously, I think everyone could understand the concerns on a regular basis. Like, as we speak at this moment, obviously there's juries, there's witnesses, people are going to take the stand, etc. We can obviously understand the sensitive nature of those type of scenarios, but in this one from last night, it's an open public meeting. It was noticed like any other meeting would be through the Open Public Meetings Act. So, in your opinion, didn't you and the rest of the freeholders feel like that this had met the requirements any other meeting should meet?
I think, as a general matter, public meetings of governing bodies, as long as the person is not interfering with another person's ability to see the meeting or hear the meeting, and is not obstructing any means of egress or ingress to the room where the meeting is occurring, then the person should be able to record video or audio record the meeting. It's a public meeting. It is what it is. But here you have a conflicting public interest, which is the security of the building, and having video images, which I could understand, of a court area being out there could be misused, and so that it's two conflicting principles. No one expected or no one thought this through, that it would apply to the jury assembly room. We could understand in the courtroom. We didn't understand also the implications of the jury assembly room. So in retrospect, it should have been in a different room.
Well, hindsight's always 20/20. It's easy to be Monday morning quarterback, et cetera, et cetera. So beyond that, let's talk about what actually happened. After about 4+ hours of action, if you want to call it that, we got the 6-3 vote that the freeholders will be looking to get out of the agreement with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
In 2 years.
Yeah, by the end of 2020. So, I personally was expecting that result. What did you think when it was all said and done?
I've been conflicted on this for a while. I do think that it is an immoral policy that that ICE and the current federal administration has in detaining immigrants who do not have status. They're not all criminals. Some of them are just picked up, and we've had examples of this in Kearney, where there are raids of work facilities, and there are detentions of people who have been, living, albeit without legal status, living in this country for many years, going to work. And there is immorality associated with, splitting up families and children that we've seen on the TV screens.
Sure.
But you have to balance that against, if you shut down the Kearney facility, these persons will still be detained because the federal policy isn't changing. They'll be detained elsewhere. And if that elsewhere, and I know it's an if, but if that elsewhere is not in this area, not near their attorneys, not near their families, then you are hurting those persons being detained. And that is also, in my view, immoral. So then you have to weigh the two. And what you can control, in my view, is, I think, how you should respond. And what we can control is how these persons detained are treated in the facility here in Kearney. And I think that is the more ethical way to handle this. It is very, very difficult. It is very sad to see what's happening, but I don't think we should make that individual's life worse by having him or her sent to a facility far from their family.
So, as we just discussed a little earlier, a couple minutes ago, you sit up on the days for the freeholders. Of course, you don't have a vote. You're just essentially doing record keeping, but making sure everything operates according to Robert's rules. But would you basically be willing to say here that if you did have a vote on this, that you would have opted to keep the contract the way it is?
I would say that under the current federal policy, which I disagree with strongly, the best that we can make of this is to ensure that the detained population has legal representation, is near their families, and are detained in conditions that are humane. And we could argue whether all those boxes are checked at the Kearney facility, and if not, they should be made better. So I don't think coming up with an artificial date or just shutting it down would be something I would vote for. Whether it's this specific 2-year schedule, I don't know about that. If this policy, and I hope it's not, still in effect in 2021, I would still want to make sure that the people detained are detained near their families in humane conditions. And so there may be a reason to continue it further.
So, of course, you're in a unique position on top of that because you're the mayor where the facility is. So I imagine you've had a chance to visit the facility on at least 1 or 2 occasions, right?
I have.
And what was your take? I mean, did you feel like the conditions were up to snuff?
I don't know. I mean, what I witnessed, I would think are normal conditions of a jail, but I don't know if those conditions are all as good as they can be. For example, as part of the witnesses or the speakers who spoke at the freeholders meeting last night, there were 2 individuals who stated in a very painful and emotional statement that they had been sexually assaulted. So whether because of their sexuality. So if that is what is occurring, then obviously more measures need to be taken. So I can't speak from what I saw, but I mean, even on an extended visit, you can only see a limited amount of what occurs.
Sure. Well, yeah, that makes sense. Well, obviously, that's a situation that we'll be keeping an eye on. So let's move beyond the facility over there for a moment. Let's talk a little bit about some Kearney-specific issues governmentally. I know that you were excited about something that the council passed 7-2 just this week. It was 60 Passaic Ave, a payment in lieu of taxes agreement, the pilot as everybody calls it. So tell us a little bit about that and why you were particularly happy that the council finally got that through.
Because I think, and I know pilots payments in lieu of taxes, which people call tax abatements, because it's a smaller payment than what the property owner would otherwise pay if it were a full tax rateable.
Sure.
And it's controversial, and people portray it as a giveaway, and there have been instances of that tax incentive being used inappropriately throughout this county. And I think in this instance, I think this is a very good example of when it should be used.
Okay.
We have a 6-acre site in Kearney. It was an old industrial site, environmentally compromised, which has been on the market for ever since I've been mayor, which is 19 years, and no buyer was willing to take it on. It's been through public auctions, multiple brokers. So what we did was we designated the area in which the property is located as an area in need of redevelopment, which opens up under state law the ability to use a payment in lieu of tax agreement as an incentive to encourage redevelopment of the site. We identified a buyer who wants to purchase the site from its current owner, and he presented an application for a pilot that was reviewed by the town's financial advisor, Tom Banker, and then we negotiated that pilot based on Tom Banker's recommendations to make sure that the pilot, based on the projected income from the site, and it's proposed to be redeveloped as residential, that it be a fair one both to the buyer, so he can make a return on his investment, and to the municipality in terms of generating income. And we did that. And the pilot is a 30-year pilot, and it will generate to the town a minimum of $16.5 million over 30 years, more likely closer to $30 million. And you compared that to, in the past 30 years, this property has generated a total in 30 years of $2 million in taxes. It's a significant financial gain for the town. The alternative is not a full rateable because the development would not occur. The alternative is continuation of what's there now, which is an empty industrial site. So I think this is a good example of when pilots should be used. I think high-rise development in real estate waterfront locations is probably not where it should be used. But an industrial site next to the Passaic River, not the Hudson River, I think this is a very worthwhile agreement and redevelopment for the town, and it's going to open up a corner of the town that for many years did not get the attention it deserved from the town.
Very interesting, Mr. Mayor. And, one other thing that caught my attention on this topic is that from what I read and what I heard, it looked like you had a strong collaborative relationship with the council on this negotiation. So could you tell us about that process?
Yes. Both the council and the county of Hudson, because the principal roadway on which this property is located is the county roadway, Passaic Avenue. And that roadway doesn't have sufficient capacity for the current traffic. So we're working with the county engineer's office and the county executive's office on how to improve the southbound traffic at the Kearney East-Newark border. There's also significant redevelopment expected on the East-Newark side of the border with the old Clark Thread factory, also being converted into residential units. So that whole area is turning from dormant industrial into a very vibrant part of our community and also soon to be the East-Newark community. The council, we worked even with the two council members that voted against this. I've worked with each trying to address. I sit on my council meetings in our form of government. I chair the council meetings, and believe it or not, the mayor chairs the council meetings, and the mayor has to address questions directly at every council meeting from the public.
Novel concept.
And I work closely with each of the council members. We've some of them for many years now, and we respect each other's views. More often than not, we agree, and sometimes we get criticism. Why is it 9-0? Why is everything 9-0? So this is the first 7-2 we've had in a while, and I think it could have. 7-2, most people would say that's a pretty good outcome. For Kearney, when we're used to 9-0, it's not. But it still, I think it still reflects the respect that each council member has for each other and the work we put into this, and knowing that, if you disagree on something today, tomorrow is, we're back to the
new day.
Yeah, but roll up our sleeves and let's move on to the next issue.
So it would be fair to say that the relationship that you have with the council is the polar opposite of what's going on in Hoboken right now. now?
Well, I only know of what I read or see on websites. So that's my dodge here. I don't want to comment on another city council. It's my dodge.
I'm just playing with you, but anyway, no, that was. It sounds like an interesting project, and another thing we're definitely going to keep an eye out and keep track of. So, beyond that, as we spoke about previously, offline, I went to the last Kearney Board of Education meeting. Some of the teachers reached out to me, and, they're really frustrated that they can't come to an agreement with the Board of Ed about their contract. I think it's been, it was about 9 months since that they've been able to rectify that, and their last contract was retroactive, so, there's a lot of angst there, and obviously there's only so much you can do. You're not in charge of that, of course, but just, your take. I'm sure a lot of people have talked to you about it, and,
I think, and I sympathize with the teachers union because of Chapter 78, and the contributions required for health care are pretty significant right now, and so that's eating up any salary increases they've had, and that's where the frustration comes in from their end. So I do understand that. From the administration side, which is the elected Board of Ed, they're facing, they have faced and continue to face charter school students going to charter schools that have opened up in Kearney in the last few years, and that has caused a drain on the budget. 90% of each child 90% of the cost of each child who lives in Kearney, who enrolls in one of those charter schools, that has to come out of the Kearney Board of Education budget, and that number is now upwards of $4 million a year and growing because one of the charter schools expanded, and that is causing a strain on their budget, a substantial strain. Because of the school formula for state funding, while some progress was made this year to make sure that state funding is based on not income characteristics of 25 or 30 years ago, but what is happening today in terms of what the free lunch and reduced lunch and special needs population is in a district. So school funding actually follows the child as opposed to an antiquated 25-year-old snapshot, and sticking to those numbers. That has caused Kearney to be underfunded substantially because over the last 30 years, the income demographic of our community has changed. And I think there was progress this year with the governor and Senator Sweeney in addressing the shortcomings in the state's funding of public education. And
was that a net gain for Kearney?
Yeah, it was a significant net gain of several $million. Didn't make up for the charter school loss, but it's still a significant net gain, and we're hoping that progress continues. We're one of the most, if you look at the per child need, we're one of the most, we're on that top 30 list of underfunded school districts in the state.
Out of 500-something municipalities?
Yeah, not all of them have
those
school districts. Some of them are merged into or rely on a nearby school district. But however you cut it, it's a significant number.
All right. Now, as we also talked about previously, I just wanted to bring it up, here though again, that they have this policy at the Board of Ed where you have to submit some sort of written notice in order to film. So obviously this is how we started the conversation, and I know that this isn't your policy or anything, but it just seems a little strange to me that you would have to do prior notice to record at a public meeting. I mean, did you know this was on the books before I brought this up to you?
Yes, there was a few years ago. It's more than a few years ago. Time just kind of.
I think it was 2009, if I'm not mistaken. But
yeah, that followed an incident where there was a student at the high school who recorded a teacher and then made those recordings public. And those recordings contained statements by the teacher that were interpreted by many to be proselytizing and advocating a specific religion. And after that, because of the privacy concerns of others in the school building, were also recorded. Not only the teacher was recorded, but also other students were recorded. the Board of Ed adopted a recording policy. That policy was extended to, at the same time, they adopted a formal policy with respect to their meetings. And I do think seeking prior approval is overly aggressive, and I do think it's an open meeting of the Board of Education. At this point, there are no children's privacy concerns in terms of videoing children. If there are any private matters discussed, then the Board of Ed will either go to committee or to closed session. So during a public session, it seems very aggressive to me to require prior approval. So I don't agree with that policy, but as I said before, it's an elected Board of Education. So it's an autonomous board, and they have to make their own determination.
Yeah, I mean, as I noted, I know it's not your policy, but beyond that, seems like we're on the same page. We'll see where it goes from here. And Mayor, just anything else you wanted to add today happening over in West Hudson you wanted to make our viewers aware about?
Yes. So in South Kearney, we talked about the jail. Not far from the jail in South Kearney are these very large buildings that were a shipyard during World War II, where it was the second largest producer of ships that were launched during World War II. And those buildings have become defunct and unused or underused. And now there's a transformation going on at that location, just down the street, about half a mile from the jail on Hackensack Avenue. These buildings are being rehabbed into spaces for small and medium-sized businesses, creative businesses, businesses that reflect the new digital economy. And many of them are women and minority-owned businesses that are moving into these spaces. And the landlord whose vision it was, Hugo New, Wendy New, and John Nislik, they really have turned a corner here in terms of their vision. And we're going to see already a couple buildings are up and running with hundreds of tenants, and we're going to continue to see progress. And it is quite remarkable to see that change that's occurring. And it's occurring in a location where you would least expect it. It's not the Hudson waterfront, but it is a great location for low rental space and to have that creative energy that many of these tenants are looking for, and a whole new community is being established and growing. And it's rewarding to see that. It's rewarding to see that it's not just the waterfront, it's not just Silicon Alley in New York City or Silicon Valley or the West Coast. That new economy is growing and spreading to areas, even to South Kearney. So that's a great thing to see, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the property owner who had the vision and joined the town in making it happen.
All right, well, it sounds interesting. Got to make the drive over there sometime soon.
Yeah, take a look. Building 78, they have a wonderful rooftop bar. And it's full of buzz and energy, and you would say you'll be surprised that it's there. You will absolutely be surprised that it's there, and it is, and it's growing, and more of it is coming.
Buzz and energy it is. Mayor, one of the most underrated mayors in the game.
Thank you.
Very good to have you. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in. Have a fantastic weekend.